The biggest shifts in history, they don't usually arrive with some big bang. Nah, they creep in. They show up as a bunch of confusing headlines and weird policy changes. But what if all that noise we're hearing is actually a symptom of something way, way deeper? What if it's a sign that the entire global order is being fundamentally rewired? Let's get into it.
Just take a look at this line. It's from the new U.S. National Security Strategy. That one sentence, it basically tears up the playbook for 75 years of American foreign policy, where the U.S. was basically the world's architect, the guarantor of the whole system. This is not just some small policy tweak. This is America saying its whole role in the world is changing. And that has consequences for every single one of us. So what is really going on here? Is this just the usual political back and forth, a change in who's in charge? Or is this massive American pivot a reaction to a huge tectonic shift in the very grammar of global power itself? That's the mystery we're going to try and solve together right here. Okay, so here's the core theory we're going to be exploring. After 500 years, the fundamental rules of how the world works, they're changing. We're moving out of what the source material calls the Oceanic Order and into a brand new Continental Era. For the last 500 years, a pretty simple logic has governed the world. If you control the seas, you control everything. Power was all about navies. Wealth piled up in the big coastal trading hubs, and finance, it became this kind of placeless, abstract force floating around the globe. This is the world that all of us were born into. But a totally new era is taking shape, one where power is literally coming back down to earth. In this new Continental Era, what really matters is physical stuff, land-based infrastructure like railways and pipelines, the sheer gravity of huge population centers, and the actual real-world production of goods. You could say geography is making a major comeback. Now, what's really fascinating here is just how complete this shift is. Every single rule is being rewritten. Sea power is giving way to land-based logistics. That floating, abstract finance is being challenged by grounded, real production. And the whole idea of these universal one-size-fits-all ideologies, it's being replaced by the return of distinct regional civilizations. And this move from the sea to the land, it isn't just a metaphor, it's a physical reality. The entire circulatory system of the global economy is being rerouted as we speak. You're about to see exactly what that looks like. This right here, this is the Great Rewiring in a single image. Just look at those flickering blue sea lanes. For centuries, those were the arteries of global trade. But now, look closer. See how they're being overlaid by these solid, glowing, land-based economic corridors, especially across Asia and Africa. This isn't just about building new train tracks. It's the planet's entire center of gravity shifting inland. So the big question is, why now? Why is this happening? Well, the sources argue that the old oceanic system isn't really being defeated by an enemy. It's just running out of steam. It's showing all the signs of a deep, systemic exhaustion. And the first symptom? Debt. Just look at this number, $318 trillion. That's the total global debt in 2024. The source actually calls this civilizational debt. It's the debt of a system that's become totally dependent on borrowing from the future just to keep the lights on today. And that massive debt? It adds up to 328% of global GDP. Just let that sink in for a second. For every $1 of actual stuff the world produces in a year, there are more than $3 of financial claims stacked on top of it. This system is basically running on fumes, borrowing its prosperity from a future that might not be able to pay the bill.
But hey, this isn't just abstract numbers on a screen. This financial weakness has very real-world consequences. The global shipping industry, the backbone of that whole Oceanic Order, is itself over-leveraged and incredibly fragile, which is something we've seen firsthand with all the disruptions in places like the Suez Canal and the Red Sea. So, as the old system is groaning under the weight of its own abstract promises, a new one is rising up, built on something you can actually touch. Power is returning to the basics: geography, people, and production. And the first law of the continent is population. This chart says it all. Almost all of the net global population growth between now and 2050 is going to happen in two places: Africa and Asia. And where the people live, work, and buy things, that's where economic gravity and power will inevitably go.
So how are these continents actually rewiring themselves? It's kind of a four-step process. First, they build infrastructure to connect with each other internally. Then, they create these huge regional free trade zones. Step 3, they start trading in their own currencies, becoming less dependent on the dollar. And eventually, they become their own self-sustaining economic worlds, way less reliant on the old centers of power.
And here's the kicker. This shift, it's already happened. If you measure by what's called purchasing power parity, which is basically what economies actually produce, the expanded BRICS Plus group now accounts for a bigger slice of global GDP than the G7. The economic center of gravity is already tilted.
Now, here's a really crucial point. This new era isn't about one empire falling and another one rising to take its place. The very nature of power itself is changing, from a top-down model of domination to something way more subtle, something networked.
Welcome to the age of circuit power. This is a type of authority that doesn't need to conquer territory with armies. No, instead, it works by controlling the essential networks of modern life: the payment systems, the technical standards, the supply chains. Power flows through connection, not through coercion.
The contrast here is pretty stark. Old imperial power was vertical. It was hierarchical, top-down. It demanded obedience, and it was enforced by armies. This new circuit power, though, it's horizontal. It's distributed. It depends on others choosing to adopt your systems because they're trusted and they work well with other systems. It's a completely different logic.
And this brings us to the real heart of the analysis. The central conflict of our time might not be East versus West, or democracy versus autocracy, like we're always told. It might be a much deeper, more fundamental civilizational choice. According to the source, the true fault line is between two completely different ways of organizing life. On one side, you have a system of fragmented abstraction, where everything, the economy, society, even power, is detached from any kind of moral or physical anchor. And on the other side, you have rooted civilization, where the economy, family, and power are all integrated, all meant to serve the continuity of that society.
And this brings us right back to where we started. Remember that shocking quote from the US strategy? It isn't happening in a vacuum. This pivot to America first, this new focus on borders, on reindustrialization, on national interest, it's being presented as a direct reaction to the failures of that abstract global order. And it's a symptom of this much deeper contest between worldviews. So we're left with this really powerful, really provocative question. As the entire world rewires itself, the fundamental choice facing every nation and maybe every person might not be political at all. It might be civilizational. Are we going to continue down this path of unlimited abstraction, or are we going to choose the path of a rooted civilization, even if that means we have to accept some restraint? That's the question that could define the rest of the 21st century.